Morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Life Alchemy. I'm Hema, and I'm joined by my fellow podcast co-hosts, Roz, Chris, and Sarah. Today, we will be talking about boundaries. So, just thinking about what are they, how to set them, and what happens when they're not there. So, with that in mind, I'm just going to kick it open and just ask people about their experience of boundary setting.
For me, it's quite a new thing, actually, weirdly. Maybe I'm just maturing a little bit too late. I still feel 9 in my head. And I think that there lies the problem. But yeah, it became quite a new thing, probably because I wasn't aware that I was a deep-rooted people pleaser. I just wasn't aware of it. It wasn't until I became a real adult, a proper adult, that I had to make decisions for my children, for my wife, for my business, all those things when you're not keeping people happy. It's almost impossible to keep people happy when you take on a leadership role. So I think the boundaries thing is really exciting for me, but also equally terrifying because I wouldn't say it's brand new territory, but it feels quite new. I don't know what anyone else feels.
Well, is that might be because you've given it a label and you didn't really realize it was a thing. Well, here I am on my birthday, so I've already broken a boundary because I was going to have the day off.
Happy birthday! But you wanted to spend it with us, didn't you? Of course you did.
But I make the point consciously because boundaries really are about what you decide they're going to be, and I do a lot of boundary work with my clients, and in fact, my next module on my online course is boundaries, or I'm calling it battleship boundaries. And so I've just been immersed in a bunch of research about it. And you're right, Chris. I mean, probably 90% of our behavior comes from kind of childhood conditioning. So we're taught certain ways to behave, or certain ways that we get rewarded if we behave. If I show up and do this, I get that, or good girls don't do whatever. And of course there's social conditioning, there's our family conditioning, and it leads us to create these boundaries or these kind of rules about ourselves. And then when you get older and you get more autonomous in lots of ways, you still find that a lot of those rules or those boundaries are being broken, and then you go, oh, they've broken my boundary, or I allowed my boundary to be broken again, and then you feel really rubbish about yourself. And I think people pleasing is probably the biggest one. If you had to give everything a really big people pleasing, or putting a gloss on it, which is a bit like covered in toxic positivity. And I'm a really big fan of Pink, the singer, and she's got a song called Family Portrait. And in the song Family Portrait, it's like they've all got this lovely family portrait on the sideboard, and the family is in Armageddon, and they're all meltdown, and the parents are screaming, and they're about to divorce. And I think her parents did divorce. And she's the kid in this song, and she's basically singing, and I've even got the words somewhere. She sings, hang on, I've got it here. Oh, I promise I'll be better, mummy. I'll do anything. I promise I'll do anything to keep you there. Can we work it out? Can we be a family? I promise I'll be better. I promise. Daddy, please don't leave. And the trouble is, as a kid, kids are narcissists, okay, in the nicest possible sense of the word. But they are, because their little world revolves around them, and they're not really aware of other objective things. And so mummy and daddy are unhappy, everything's going to hell in a handcart, it must be my fault. Therefore, if I'm better, it will all be okay. And the trouble is, you're right, Chris, you wake up and you're 35, you're 40, you're 45, you're 50, and you're still doing the same thing, feeling the same way. And you can't understand why you allow everybody to trample all over what you want to be your boundaries. Does that all make sense?
100%. You've probably unlocked something for me there. Thanks for that therapy session.
The bill's on its way.
I think for me, exactly the same, like what you have said, Chris, is my own experience as well. And I feel like when I look back over my life, I was always my former self was always so shy, and it was like just labeled as, oh, she's just shy or really accommodating. But actually what it was is it was actually massive people pleasing and being absolutely terrified to have an opinion or to disagree with something. And what I'm figuring as well, just very recently even, that a lot of it has been tied up in toxic relationships and gaslighting. Like gaslighting is something that people have been talking about, and I'm really just starting to learn about it now. And a lot of that really involves a lot of boundaries, and where when you're being gaslit, you're not aware that your boundaries are being like trampled all over. And yeah, and what I'm realizing now is that I've always done things to appease people, because I always felt and tried to get approval from people, and because I always felt that I could never really understand why someone was angry with me or why someone felt hurt. And it was a way of being manipulated. So I had zero boundaries. I didn't even know that that was the situation, that was happening. I had no boundaries. But it's really only in the last sort of 5 to 10 years that I've started to be aware that boundaries exist and that I'm allowed to have a voice and to use it. And when you say about you said before, but it's actually terrifying, and it is terrifying because it feels really counterintuitive to make a stand and to say, actually, do you know what, this isn't, I'm not happy with this is, and you try to protect yourself. It feels counterintuitive because there's that fear that the other person is going to not like you, they're going to hate you, they're going to feel really hurt. But it's counterintuitive because all the time you're doing that, you're giving your power away all the time. But in actual fact, the more you stand your ground, the more clear you are about your own boundaries, and the more you kind of stand strong with your boundaries, the more respect and the more approval you're going to get. So it's a difficult one, but I guess it's just practice, isn't it? And I don't think it ever ends, because I think life is always going to throw you situations or people or experiences or relationships that are always going to test your boundaries. And so sometimes, you know, it's kind of like an ebb and a flow, isn't it? Like sometimes you're going to catch yourself, and it's when you feel that icky feeling or you feel, oh, actually, this doesn't feel quite right, that you realize some boundaries are being crossed here.
You know why, don't you? So everybody fold their arms, okay? Just fold your arms really quickly. Now fold your arms the other way. How weird does that feel?
It does feel weird.
Yeah, and the trouble is the brain likes what's familiar. Okay?
Yeah.
And so even though it's not really serving you, and even though you didn't even know you signed up for it, because, you know, we go back to the childhood and that's what happened, and that was how you learned to behave and how you created these kind of weird boundaries, and then they get broken and then you don't like it. You've got to make what's unfamiliar familiar, and it's like that. It's like, try brushing your teeth tonight with your other hand. It's weird, but you can get used to it. But knowing it and recognizing it and really just going with your feeling is probably the biggest, you know, save you a lot of money in therapy, actually. I'm doing myself a disservice here. But actually recognizing it feels off, and why does it feel off, and why did I allow that to happen? That's because the boundary you have is really not your own or of your choosing. And what would you like your boundary to be like? That's kind of the process, really.
I think there is something quite interesting. You know, Chris, you said earlier about it feeling like it's come late to you in life. I can definitely that resonates with me. I feel like it's come late to me, and I'm stuck at a 12-year-old. So I'm not 9, I'm 12 on the inside, and a 12-year-old boy at that, which is slightly disturbing. But that's another story. I think
you can identify as whatever you like, Helen.
Absolutely.
I think there is something about just having that awareness of, like you said there, Roz, what do you want your boundaries to be? Because often, you know, when I think back to when a boundary was crossed, I remember one time I had a boyfriend who was an awful person, and we had a really difficult relationship. And the only time I felt that I stood my ground was when he was unfaithful. So that was the boundary in my mind, was that there's no coming back from that. So end of. And it was a clear boundary, but when I think about it, I think there were so many things where I didn't really create my own boundaries, create my own space and respect them. And, that responsibility, I think, is on us to think about, what do we accept? What do we want to tolerate? What do we not want to tolerate? And Sarah, you said something quite interesting, which was like, you get that feeling of resentment, don't you? When something feels like, you'll say something and deep down you're like, I don't really want to do that, but I'll do it anyway. I used to be typically, that's typically me. So I'm learning, and I think I might have said it last week around, not to lie, not to apologize if I don't want to do something, just say something. It was really uncomfortable at first. I was like, I can't do that. And then when I tried it, actually, everyone was like, yeah, that's fine. And it's got easier, and now it's quite enjoyable. So there's something about understanding our own and then respecting them. The thing that's coming into my head is actually, I guess there are different kinds of boundaries, aren't there? I guess there are like mental boundaries, emotional boundaries with time.
I mean, physical, your body. I mean, if you think about it, the biggest boundary you have is your skin.
Yeah.
And your skin holds your body, and you hold your own boundary to your body. And so you decide what will and won't literally go into your body.
Yeah.
I mean, without us going into massive controversy and getting banned by every channel we're going to be broadcast on, in the big C debate at the moment, there is a bit of about what's the sovereignty of my body? Should I be forced to take something that I don't want to take to protect somebody else? Maybe. Okay. But at the end of the day, my ultimate sovereignty is to my own body. And of course, that goes back to sexual shaming or women or anybody being exploited. It's your body. So I think that physical boundary, your body, your skin is paramount, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because my when it came to me that I'd kind of not set boundaries or the early warning signals when I was younger, and it was in a bizarre way, I was really fearful of everybody who I knew being in the same room at the same time. And I didn't really understand where that was coming from.
Yeah.
And you can only really kind of connect the dots and make sense of most things when you look back over. Now, when I look back, it's because I was saying yes to people when on the inside I should have been saying no. And I didn't want them to kind of collide and come together, if you know what I mean, because it would have kind of exposed me as a person to be a liar, even though I wasn't a liar. I wasn't a liar. I was just trying to please people. But in that process, I was living a lie in many respects.
Yeah, you were turning up how they wanted you to turn up, not how you were, not with the consistency of being you.
And there was a really interesting spot on there, and there's a really interesting question. It came from me being in a miserable state and not realizing it. And once I started to identify that I was miserable, I then started to backtrack with a coach. And the question was asked is, what am I becoming? And it was that one question that sent me on a bit of a journey of saying no without explanation.
Oh, yeah.
And that's hard. Like,
very hard.
That was the exact opposite. Like, I've got a lot of confidence now, but back then I had very little confidence to carry this through, but I had a commitment to it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at life, it dismantled a few relationships. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, as hard as they are, it's probably the best thing that's ever happened. There's still some residual guilt about it because we attach labels to people in our family and we go, well, you must have a relationship with such and such because everybody else does. And that's just not true. That's another lie. And,
no, it's not true.
And once I identified, actually, that's making me miserable and the consequences are we have to move and split apart, everything changed for me. And for those other people involved, even though they probably wouldn't admit it. But for me, I think there's a couple of things, you've got to you've got to ask, how can I respond in alignment with how I'm feeling, what my beliefs are, what my morals are, and as well, give a bit of time between it.
And also, what do you need? Because
the
trouble about responding in alignment with your feeling, and you know, I talked earlier about feeling off, but you might be so conditioned to never even respecting your own feelings or putting yourself first, that it won't feel at all familiar. And you know, you might have even grown up in a house culture, whatever, where, you know, don't be so selfish. You know, if you put yourself first, you know, God forbid, you know, we use that oxygen analogy, don't we? And women particularly of a certain age, you know, they're rubbish, you know, and they go and go and go and go and go, and they think that's really good, and they're being really lovely, and then they just fall off the edge of the cliff, you know. And it's like when you get on the plane, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before your kids, otherwise you are unconscious. And that takes a lot of coaching. I'm sure you guys all do that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all about facing the right way, isn't it? You know, that phrase was said to me years ago, you know, whenever you're tackling something, you've got to be sure to be facing the right way and not facing outward. Yes, outward is a really important thing to do, and look for people in the room and help them out. But also, we've got to spend that time facing inwards.
Yeah.
And that for me, that really changed a lot.
I think following on what you were saying, Chris, about the kind of having what's coming up for me is about respect. And it's about having respect for yourself, and also respecting other people, and knowing that other people should have respect for you. And I think if they're not respecting you, then they're not respecting your boundaries. So like when you were saying, feeling like you can say no and you don't have to give an explanation. And if someone respects you, they'll just accept it and they'll go, okay, yeah, fine. But if someone's not respecting you and your boundaries, they'll be pressing you and saying, well, why? I don't understand why. But they just need to give you that, you know, that time, that space, or just respects that you're either going to open up and share it or you're not. So yeah, respecting yourself, not to have to give explanations. And then also I was going back to the point about Hema, when you were saying the different types of boundaries, and Roz, you were saying about the body, and then it made me think about like the mind and like boundaries, and because it's coming up as protection as well. Like we have these boundaries to protect ourselves. So it's also with the mind, you know, what are we feeding our mind? What are we consuming? And that's from things that we are reading, programs we're watching, news, the people in our lives.
Totally.
Yeah, and then the circle, like who do we allow in our circle? Because the kind of people we have around us, that's definitely going to have an effect on who we are as a person. And now I'm so careful who I let in my circle around me, that if someone doesn't respect my boundaries, they are gone. Like,
me too.
There's no trying to work it out. There's no trying to educate. No, they either respect my boundaries or they're out. You know, because if someone's not respecting your boundaries, they're draining you. They're taking your energy away from you. You know, they're taking your power. But then at the same time, you know, you have to just not allow that to happen, which is why I've learned. And regardless of who it is, like Chris, like you were saying, they could be really close, you know, the people who should be around
a parent, they could be, you know.
Yeah, but just saying no, and just protecting yourself in your circle, really.
The bubble idea, Sarah, like there's while you all were talking, it made me think back to like an experience I had when I was quite probably like mid-20s. I was in an office and I didn't have a very good relationship with my boss at the time. She'd gone away on maternity leave. I was very happy about that because my life was like heaven while she was gone. And when she came back, I remember feeling like, and I couldn't put it to, like, I knew she'd come back on maternity leave, but literally all of a sudden in my desk where I was sitting, we used to sit in those cubicles, you know, like with the little barriers in between the desks all sitting quite close together, and she was sitting on the table up the next table away at the other side. There was sort of like two barriers between us, if you like. Anyway, I felt fine, and all of a sudden it was about 2 weeks later, every time I came to my desk I felt really uncomfortable and I couldn't really explain it, and I didn't know what it was. Like I just didn't feel right. And after a while, I realised that she had switched desks and she had moved like a barrier closer. And I felt that that was having an impact. So I couldn't explain that to anyone because they might have thought I was mad. But I moved desks and I realised the minute I moved desks, I felt
no way.
That distance, yeah.
And I didn't understand it then. And there's still so much that I don't fully understand now. But there is something energetically, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Well,
yeah,
the trouble is, again, sorry, being the psychologist here, but I hope you're all going to scribble.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Pens at the ready, everybody. This thing about taking the behaviors we learn as children, and the trouble is other people bust your boundaries because that's what maybe they learn got them what they want. So there's a biscuit test with kids. Nice plate of biscuits, some really nice, some really rubbish, you know, so chocolate chip nice, whatever, like boring. And they put kids in a room and they kind of go, you know, you take the biscuit, and you see these behaviors, and they're either kind of no, you choose first, you know, and the kid really wants the chocolate chip cookie, you know, and then the other ones get the chocolate chip cookie and they take the digestive, and they're kind of doing it to please them, to make them like them, you know. It's like, if I'm nice to you, you will like me. The trouble is it can lead to being quite martyrish if you keep that sort of behavior going right until adulthood. It's like you never even learn what your own wants are, you know. Julia Roberts in The Runaway Bride, there's a scene where she cries because she doesn't know how she wants her eggs in a cafe, because a diner, because she's always, you know, Brad had his eggs fried, I had my eggs fried, you know, Dudar had his eggs poached, I had my eggs poached. I don't even know how I like my eggs, but you know, it sounds like an existentialist, you know, breakdown, but in a way it's really important. Wow. And then you get the kids who take what they want. Well, I will have that one, and you're like, I don't like them, you know, and then they probably turn out to be Donald Trump and you know, like that, but you know, and they probably get their own way, but they probably don't make a lot of friends along the way. Yeah. So the trouble is these behaviors come, and so they're used to what they're doing, and you're used to kind of either allowing it or not allowing it. And you're right, and you get to a point where you're in the office and you're like, what is going on? I'm really, you know, she's a biscuit stealer, and I'm a biscuit, you know, like trying to be fair person, and it sounds crazy, but this is what happens. So
it's true.
And Chris, you said about knowing what you want, and I think that is the issue. And the trouble is, because you often haven't, the Julia Roberts, I don't even know how I like my eggs. People go, but I don't even know what I want because I've never been allowed to have it. And so I'm going to throw in the Wizard of Oz, because I've been thinking a lot about things recently, a lot of things, and I love the Wizard of Oz. And if you think about the Wizard of Oz, they all go to find the wizard because they think the wizard's going to give them something. Dorothy wants to go home, the Scarecrow wants a heart, the Tin Man wants a brain, and the lion wants courage. And they get to Oz and they find Oz is a fake, and he's a flim-flam artist behind a curtain going, the great and powerful Oz. And they're like, oh my God, we've come all this way to get these things and he can't give us them. And he goes, what did you do on the journey? This is very much a hero's journey, actually. What did you do on the journey? Well, we fought off these flying monkeys and all this malarkey. You did have courage, you did have a brain, you did, you know, and all the time you knew that home was in your heart. So what they learn in the Wizard of Oz is actually the very thing they're seeking, they have inside themselves.
Wow, super powerful, that. I think the extremes of anything are just as damaging as each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, over people pleasing is just as bad as the Trumps of the world who trample around getting what they want.
Balance, isn't it? It's finding that balance.
Definitely.
So on that note, if we were going to leave our listeners with one thing, one idea, one thought, something to follow, what would you share?
Well, thinking about the energy, one thing, I was listening to this meditation the other day, and I do this sometimes anyway, but normally like a protection bubble.
Mm.
But I found this thing about boundaries, and it was an energy boundary, and it's the same concept. So imagine yourself to take some time out to meditate, breathe, get in the right space, but imagine yourself surrounded inside an egg. So the egg, it goes into the earth below your feet, it goes above your head, and you're completely surrounded by this egg. And the egg can be like gold, or it can be like full of rainbow colors, or however you want this to look. And then imagine that this egg is like the shell is like the boundary of a cell, where it only allows in the goodness that you need, and it keeps out all of the stuff that is bad and negative. And there is also a visualization where in this meditation where you call upon the universe, and you ask the universe, you're calling back to yourself to come into the egg, into your space, all of the power that you have given away in the past, and you're calling it all back into this nice little egg. You're protected, only the good stuff comes in, and anything that's not worthy or it just stays out, and you just keep yourself protected. So I think on a spiritual level, it's beautiful, but also on a psychological level, if you're doing that all the time, it's just keeping that awareness that having to protect yourself and maintain your boundaries at the forefront of your mind. So that I thought was really really simple but powerful.
Well, there's a podcast there, Sarah. There's a podcast there. I think we should put that on the list to chat about.
Definitely.
That's really nice. I love that, and I might ask you a few questions after the podcast about that, because I'm just really interested in it. But on kind of a practical level as well, who to follow or what to follow for me is I separated my wants and needs. When I was in that predicament, I separated what do I need and what do I want, and I separated them into two lists. And then what I did was, so the first one was identify what they were. The second thing to do was to work out which one is non-negotiable, which one am I absolutely not going to get rid of. And some of the ones actually were, there was quite a lot of ones that were non-negotiable. Others I would go, well, I could live without that, or I'd be okay without that. And then the last one, the third one, is the biggie. It's the practical one, and that's just communicate it. Go out to the world and communicate your intentions, tell people and share, and answer those questions when people ask you with honesty. Do you want this? No, I don't. Thank you, though. And that's it. It doesn't get more complicated than that. And that's the 3-step process that I followed, but it all stemmed from, identifying what do I need and what do I really want. Massively helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How about you, Ros?
Well, I would just say that in terms of like who to follow, I've been reading Adriana Huffington's book, Fearless. And I posted today Diane Keaton on being 60. And I think it pretty much sums up how I feel, to be honest, because she's basically going, it's very much like that Regrets of the Dying, book that she talks about her father and what he regretted. And what he regretted was not saying no, not saying yes, not being himself, not being true to himself, and being fearful of what other people would think. And I have to say, the older I get, the less I care.
I love it.
I can just from me, I can vouch for the bubble, because Sarah shared the bubble idea with me a little while ago. I've used it made a massive difference. And then I also passed the bubble idea on to somebody else who also said it really transformed how they were feeling, and in turn the reaction they got from other people. So we'll definitely talk about the bubble more, I think, in one of our future podcasts. And then I think the final thing for me, just to say, it's all about, for me, like, just to be really clear on when to say yes and how to say no. And just hold those two questions in my mind at the forefront of your mind when you're doing anything, really, because I sometimes think boundaries feel like a big thing that you need to cross, when actually I think they are small everyday interactions that happen constantly. So I've got a Canadian friend, and she says people show you who they are by how they turn up.
And I think a lot of it is just what you do or don't do. So, you know, I'll have a client who goes, oh, they're constantly ringing me at 11 o'clock. It's terrible. And I go, and they go, oh, I go, don't answer the phone. You know, it's like if you're somebody who goes away on holiday, don't disturb me while I'm on holiday. And then people from the office send you emails and you answer them, you know, and then you're really angry. It's like,
I agree.
Boundaries are there for you to set, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
To understand, to set, to hold, to protect, and to respect. And if you don't, no one else is going to, I imagine.
yeah.
Just to add, I just got a little shout out. I won't say the name, but I'm super proud of one of my clients at the moment because she started a new job and it's a promotion. It's a completely new, you know, she's only been there. But before she started, she even said, look, this time I want to go in and I want to make sure that I've got this real balance. I'm protecting my time. I'm not doing overtime. And we're working through it. And she's doing, I think it's so brave because I think in a situation like that where you've got a new job and you're in a probation period, you're terrified of rocking the boat, you know, but she's like, no, I want to start something to go on. And I just think that's amazing. So you're doing a lot of boundary work with her, and I just think she's so brave to do that. So yeah, it's so what I'm saying is it doesn't matter what the situation is. Like people might think, oh, you can't say that when you've got a new job. Yeah, you're like, no, say it, speak up, use your voice, like look after yourself, protect yourself.
Yeah. On that note, I think this has been a really interesting chat, actually. I've taken away loads from it about, you know, we've covered things from like, how do we understand what our own boundaries are, you know, how we morph from people pleasers to understanding what we need versus what we want, how different boundaries actually manifest, whether it's energetically, whether it's your body, whether it's time, whether it's material stuff, physical, mental. And I feel like I've taken away so much. We've discussed so many things around like what actually we can do to start understanding our own boundaries and respecting them. So I think it's been a great conversation.
Me too.
Me too. I've loved it. Thank you.
So from us, I guess we shall see you all next time. But thank you for listening, and it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from the birthday girl.
Yeah, goodbye from me.